Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. And today I want to talk about a modern release that I absolutely adore, and that is FromSoftware's Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I remember the teaser trailer that launched for this game and all the speculation online as to what it was going to be. Most people thought it was going to be a Bloodborne sequel. I was very excited about that prospect because I was just getting into Bloodborne. I was really enjoying myself. But then when it was actually announced as Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, a brand new IP, everyone was really intrigued. I'm sure there was some disappointment that it wasn't a sequel to Bloodborne, but I think there was much more intrigue and excitement around this prospect of a brand new IP. And when it finally launched, it debuted with so many new mechanics and so many different things that most people say now that it's not a Souls game, and they will adamantly say that it absolutely isn't. I was doing some research online to kind of refresh myself. It's been just a little bit since I finished this game, and there's so much discourse about it not being a Souls game or whether it should even be included in that category. I will say right away that the biggest thing that it shares with the Dark Souls series, the Bloodborne, is that it is very difficult. It still has that very difficult FromSoftware touch to it. The combat is also very difficult. Small enemies can kill you really easily. It shares that with the other Souls games. But most everything else is very different. For starters, the leveling system is absent here. In fact, most of the RPG mechanics are pretty much gone. You play as the same character across any game. You don't customize your character at all. You don't choose your weapon. You don't upgrade your character or your weapon at all. You do other things like a skill tree. You upgrade equipment. You'll have other ways of upgrading your character throughout the game that are not like the Souls series or Bloodborne or even Elden Ring that's come since. It's very much a more action-adventure game instead of an action RPG. I think that was a bold risk to take because people had been so acclimatized to the Dark Souls series, to Bloodborne. I think they were expecting more of the same. But thank goodness they did not, because this experience is absolutely fantastic. I talked about it in my Bloodborne video, how Bloodborne is my favorite FromSoftware game, but Sekiro comes in right behind it, and the two experiences could not be more different. Sekiro, instead of being very action-heavy and really attack-based like Bloodborne, is incredibly defensive-based. In fact, there's a lot of stealth elements that you can incorporate as well. You learn early on, you can stealth behind a lot of enemies and kill them in one shot, which is really cool, really unique thing that they added to this game. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. You play as Wolf, a shinobi warrior who is attacked by this guy early on in the game. You lose your arm, and you are given a prosthetic by this dude who takes you over and saves you. This prosthetic gives you a grappling hook that allows you to scale like into trees and buildings. You can jump in this game pretty high as well. You have a ton of verticality in this game, unlike anything we've ever seen in any Souls game up to this point. You have so much verticality that was introduced in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice that the different levels of buildings could give different challenges and different enemies. It's very interesting. Adding verticality adds so much depth to this franchise, or to this formula that FromSoftware has cultivated up to this point. The verticality itself just adds so much uniqueness to the game, and making the traversal also very interesting. There's tons of areas where you can essentially climb a mountain with certain grappling hook points. It makes the experience much different and stands out in a really major way. And I quite enjoy the traversal options. I love the stealth mechanics as well. Now, one of the biggest things that's different about this game, I mentioned there's no customization. You use just this katana that you have, is the action system, the attacking system. The combat in this game is vastly different than anything we'd seen up to this point. The combat revolves around breaking your opponent's stature, their posture, their balance. You are attacking them, but instead of landing blows on your opponent, you are breaking their guard, essentially. They're blocking your attacks, and the more attacks you hit, and the more that you're able to accurately hit their weak points, as it were, you can break their guard, which will give you an indication of a big red mark on them, which indicates that you can go in for a killing blow. Now, for smaller enemies, it's a single blow. In bigger enemies, especially bosses, it'll take several breaking of their guards and then attacking them, doing a couple of what normally would be a killing blow to fell these bigger opponents. This is a wildly different system, and you share that system with these enemies as well, and these bosses. You have a guarding system, and the more you guard, the more they get closer to breaking your posture and can deal lots of damage to you. You can take individual hits. If you're not guarding, you can take stuff that will do massive damage to you. What I like about this combat system is that it is very more grounded in reality. Whereas the experience itself, there's tons of mythos still, tons of creatures, tons of things that are clearly not grounded in reality, but the combat system itself feels fairly grounded. And I like that approach. It's very cool. You can circumvent guarding and making the decision to, you can jump out of the way, you can try and guard if you want to, but if you're guarding too much, you could break your posture. You can also parry a lot of hits. If you get really good at parrying, and you have to if you're going to get through this game, if you can get really good at parrying, you'll not only reduce your guarding gauge, you'll be able to get some of that back, but you'll also decrease their guard gauge. Parrying someone decreases, or I guess fills up their guard break gauge. And gives you a huge advantage. So mastering the parry system is absolutely fundamental to enjoying this game and succeeding in this game as well. There are also some enemies that don't really operate under the normal conditions. There are some things that buck the trends that you have. You have to use other equipment. You'll have to use consumables throughout the world that you find. There are some headless enemies that slow you down substantially and that can close the gap and kill you very quickly. That you have to use a special type of consumable to take them down and deal damage to them, or deal massive damage. You can damage them, but they don't go down nearly fast enough for you to actually win the fight. So there's enough variance in this game to really shake up the formula and always keep you on your toes, keep you moving forward. It's fantastic. I think the combat in this game is 100% everything that it should be, especially for something so steeped in Japanese mythos, and it's just crafted perfectly, in my opinion. I know I talked about how Bloodborne, I love the fast-paced action, I love the focus on attacking and not guarding, but this game takes such a different approach and makes it so integral to the system. Whereas in Dark Souls, you can get away with tanking hits, you can use shielding, or you can utilize rolling a lot. This game, you have to know when to guard, when to parry, when to jump, when to get out of the way, when to attack. And if you are not perfect, you could just die. And that is a very real danger, especially against some of the bosses. And I love that this is what they went for. It makes every action in this game very calculated, very important. And I've talked about how in other Souls games, making sure you're doing the right thing in combat can be really important, but it is much more important in this game. I think in Dark Souls, if you got used to attack patterns, if you got used to how things operated, the mechanics of the game, you could essentially abuse the mechanics in a way that you could make a lot of fights very trivial, even boss fights. And Sekiro, you have to just perfect the combat system, the dodging, the parrying system. There are some attacks that are unblockable, and you have to not only see the indicator to know when to dodge, you have to know if you need to jump or get out of the way, sidestep, backstep. There are tons of variables to work through in a combat scenario, and reacting in time is really, really important. You also gain skills. Some of these unblockables actually force you to dodge into the attacker to counterattack them. And it's something that's really unique and interesting that you don't really think about when you're playing a Souls game. It plays with your expectations in such a way that it always keeps you on your toes, teaching you something new about this game. And if you're not paying close enough attention, you will probably start to fall behind. There were a couple of fights that I got to that I realized I didn't understand the mechanic of the fight. And I had to eventually look it up because I wasn't paying close enough attention. And that made me zero in on this experience and really think about what I was doing, even more so than I already was. But along with the excellent combat and this system that's, I think, a really beautiful, perfect combat system, you also have gorgeous set pieces. FromSoft is known for their beautiful worlds, but nothing is more beautiful than Sekiro, in my opinion. They have these beautiful vistas and these high vertical buildings. You have even bosses that are big set pieces in themselves, giant albino snake that attacks you, and you have to stealth through these areas to get to a point where you can actually stab it and attack it and hurt it and kill it eventually. Everything that From Software builds in this game is just really beautiful and well done. They're intense action set pieces that really test your mettle and test your understanding of the game. You will never get to a point in this game where the game feels easy. You will go throughout this game and perpetually find harder and harder challenges to overcome. You'll get new mechanics. You'll get new areas where you have to swim underwater at some point. You'll have other areas where you have to catch lightning in the middle of the air. There is no limit to what this game won't throw at you. There's tons of lore to explore. Of course, From Software is great at building the lore, secret bosses and everything. One of the hardest bosses in the game, probably the hardest boss in the game, is an optional boss that you have to do some side quest stuff in order to unlock. One of the hardest fights I've ever experienced in a Souls game ever. I guess in a From Software game, excuse me, because we're not saying it's a Souls game. I remember getting to that boss and bashing my head against it so many times. I looked up guides. I couldn't figure it out. I just had to say, I need to just buckle down and find out a good strategy for myself that works. I was able to topple that particular boss. It's a late game, so I won't spoil it for anybody, but it is absolutely worth your time. It is ridiculous. It bucks every trend from the game. It turns combat completely on its head for you. It is an excellent fight, a terrifying boss, and just out of this world good. The boss fights in this game are all very, very unique and well executed. They, again, test your understanding of the game and the limits of the combat system, what you can do and can't do, your timing of your parries. Everything about every boss will just build upon each other until you ultimately reach the final boss, which is an insanely difficult fight. One that toppling will take you a very long time, probably. Even if you're a master of the game, if you've mastered the combat and everything, the final boss will still kick you around 100 times until you finally take him down. Sekiro is a masterpiece. From Software took a big risk, in my opinion, in doing something so bombastically different from the Souls series, but it is absolutely worth it, in my opinion. I will say that I group it together with the Soulsborne title. I have said in some of my videos that the From Software pantheon to avoid saying Sekiro is a Souls game. But I still will group it in there because it's made by From Software. But I understand where a lot of the divergence comes from the fan base. I understand what they're saying because it is very, very different from any Souls experience that you'll have. But if you give it a shot and you can put the time into making the combat work for you, you will find probably no better action RPG or action adventure game than Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I don't know if you can make a case for pretty much anything else. There's so much to love about this game. The environments are gorgeous and varied. There's tons to do in this game. The bosses will always push you to your limits. I think no other From Software game does it better in like building upon difficulty and making difficulty always improve from boss to boss. You'll never find an easy fight. You will find nothing but enjoyment in this game if you're willing to put in the time. I give Sekiro Shadows Die Twice an easy platinum rank. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next one.